For the final time this season, it is CFL Power Rankings as we go into the postseason. Coming in at number 9, they aren't going into the postseason. It's the Calgary Stampeders. I think the undisputed worst team in the Canadian Football League this year. They will have the number 1 overall pick, and so because of all of these struggles, they will change nothing. Dave Dickenson is still going to be the head coach and general manager going into next season. Now, I do think that significant roster moves are going to happen, but that is because they have to. This team has a ton of free agents, as most do in the CFL. I don't even know what the core is of this team anymore. And we could maybe do a deeper dive on this at some point, but I don't know if there is one aspect of this team where you look at and it's like, yeah, you know what? Rock solid, baby. I think you could use, obviously, an upgrade at quarterback. The running backs, yes. Offensive line, yeah, probably. Wide receivers, might need another one. On the defensive line, well, couldn't stop the run at all last year. So front 7, I would say you could use some help. Defensively, I mean, they didn't give up a whole lot of pass yards. That's because everyone kept running on them. But when they needed a big stop through the air, they never got one. So at least they got the kicker. That's it. It's just awful right now in Calgary. Really, really bad for the Stampeders. Genuinely terrible. Very little room for hope. Okay, now I'm over-exaggerating, because things can turn around in the CFL very quickly, and you still have a lot of very good coaches there. You just need the players to build it around. So this is a key year for Dave Dickenson. Coming in at 8, it is the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They had a real good close to the season, but just a couple little, some stumbles early really set them back, and then a couple little stumbles late, and they just couldn't get there. But this is one where I think they enter a pretty interesting offseason now, where Bo Levi Mitchell at least put up a very strong candidacy for MOP and was able to get a lot out of this offense and really was able to maximize his talents under Scott Milanovich and everything. And really, like, once he stopped turning the ball over, you really started to see him shine. And so I think there was a maturing in his game this year. And once he did everything the coaching staff told him to, there was success. And so I think you can see pretty clearly where there could be some room for optimism out in Hamilton. But this is the first time he's looked good in like 6 years. Slight exaggeration. It's the first time he's looked good and healthy in 6 years. I'll say that. And so at, what is he, 35 now? Are we trusting that is going to happen again when you have this Powell cat behind him, who we are all assuming is going to be potentially the next one and has actually shown that he has some flashes here. And so you can understand why Winnipeg would let young Drew Brown walk and potentially be the quarterback of the future somewhere else, because Zach Collaros is here winning West Division titles and occasional Grey Cups and all of those things. So you kind of just stay in the moment. Bo Levi Mitchell is putting up big stats, but y'all just are 8th in the power rankings and you didn't make the playoffs. So it's tougher to let quarterback potentially of the future walk and let the veteran guy stick around. So an interesting decision coming up in Hamilton. Speaking of interesting quarterback decisions, at number 7, it is Edmonton. I think a lot of people in the Alberta capital would like to see them go for Trey Ford, but I do think that a lot of people's thought is, well, try to get Vernon Adams first, or maybe a Nathan Rourke, and if you can't get that, well, maybe a this guy and a that guy, and then if all of them say no, hey, look at that, Trey Ford is still here. Trey Ford is also a free agent, and I think that he would potentially like to test the waters a little bit. So I think that is going to be very interesting to see. But yeah, there's, again, you're kind of starting anew out in Edmonton, but at least you saw a few signs of optimism as the season wound down. At 6, it's Ottawa. The game didn't mean a whole lot, but just to have Ottawa come out and play the way they did against Hamilton and try to get back on track has to give you at least a little bit of optimism going into their game in Toronto this upcoming weekend. At 5, it's the BC Lions. They had the week off, but coming off of a great performance from Vernon Adams, feeling pretty good out in BC right now. Have to be feeling really good about Vernon Adams and seeing if he can get back to that MOP trajectory that he was on at the start of the season. At 4, it's Montreal. They didn't play a really meaningful game all season long, or not all season long, but for the last couple of months. Can they flip that switch now and turn it back on? They're going to have to for one game when they host the East Final coming up in a couple of weeks. At 3, it's Saskatchewan. Had their hearts broken just before the game against the Calgary Stampeders when wind blew the Edmonton or the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, into the postseason as the number 1 seed. So Saskatchewan didn't have a whole lot to play for, but defensively they're playing really well at the right time. Offensively, I think they figured out who their guys are, and they have a lot of really interesting weapons to go up against BC and then potentially Winnipeg in the West Final. At 2, it is Toronto. Speaking of peaking at the right time, I do not like saying a whole lot of great things about Chad Kelly, but his arrival certainly turned things around for the Argos, and they are riding all the momentum going into the postseason here. And at number 1, it's Winnipeg. It was not as easy nor convincing as we thought it was going to be after, with a chance to wrap up the top spot in the CFL's West Division, but a win is still a win, and they now get a week off to get ready for the West Final. So for the final time this season, those are your CFL Power Rankings. More CFL talk to come this week. Thursday is going to be the CFL playoff preview. Tomorrow, we're going to look at the X factors in the 2 playoff games for the weekend. So that is what is coming up here this week in the Canadian Football League.